Hello, everybody, and welcome to Big Joe's Journal. And once again, because of COVID-19, wearing a mask, muffled voice, it's the way it goes, as long as this is required. And it's also going to be a necessity if we're ever going to get this COVID-19 thing under control. It gets rather frustrating when you see the numbers and you say, why is it going away? And it seems to be increasing. Vermont recorded one more death due to COVID-19 over the weekend, and I'm not sure where that brings us right now. But the number of recorded people that have been affected by COVID-19 now is running pretty close to 20,000. Just in the state of Vermont alone. And the number of deaths related to COVID-19 is close to 60. I think it's 57 or 58, somewhere in there. So compared to the rest of the nation, we're not doing too bad. But anytime you've got any kind of an infection going around and taking human lives, it's not good. For those of you that follow high school sports, you've seen what COVID-19 did to our winter high school sports programs, especially our state championships. Teams that won the state champions, they're not necessarily the best team in the state. For example, take girls basketball. West Rutland was undefeated in the regular season, and then COVID-19 intervened. The West Rutland starting five were all benched, so he had to go with reserves, and he got knocked out. Now, on a season basis, if West Rutland had been allowed to play right through, no doubt it would have been Division IV girls state champs. You had the same thing with the MSJ boys in Division II. COVID-19 took them out of the running. They were set to go into the semifinals, and they had to forfeit and drop out. The Division I boys champions are BFA of St. Albans. Not necessarily the best team in the state. Well, no, I'm not sure that they are now. No, it's the Rice girls basketball team that had to drop out. Champlain Valley Union High School, that is one of a fantastic record in girls basketball, and we're undefeated this year. COVID-19 took them out of the picture. And there were a number of other teams that had to end their season early because of COVID-19. We're seeing it on the NCAA double, where some of the former powerhouses that aren't there anymore. So, we'll just see how it plays out. There will be champions crowned, but are they the true champions? Well, in many cases, not really. But, take credit where credit is due and roll the punch. And hopefully, in a year's time, we'll have this thing under control. And it can get under control if people get their shots, people continue to wear masks. We go with this ban on large groups getting together. Might be a little difficult in the summer. Actually, it shouldn't be. We have a good summer. People can be outdoors. A lot of things you can do by yourself. You're in small groups or family groups. Wear a mask. Spread around in the outdoors. Eventually, we will get it under control. As the age group, when you can register to get a shot, keeps dropping down, things are going to look better and better. But you've got to get the shot. You've got to follow the directions of the medical profession. And everybody wear a mask. I know things are frustrating. People want to get together. It's been a long time, and people are getting frustrated, and we see that with large group gatherings, for example, spring breaks down in Florida and California, and people starting to travel again on airlines. Airline traffic is picking up, starting to boom. And some people are saying, well, let's go, let's get going, let's get back to normal. Many places, restaurants are being allowed to reopen under certain guidelines. But you know, folks, we got to hang in there. We got to be patient. And eventually, it's going to take a long time. This is a disaster. This disease is a disaster. And we didn't deal with it the way we should have under the previous administration. But now we're getting it under control. It's going to take time, but we'll have it under control and move on from there. Well, another big item that we know spring is here. The weather's getting a little better, although the day's kind of chilly. But we do have warm days. It's daylight longer. And spring training, baseball spring training is winding up, and come this week, the 2021 season will be underway. And they're going to start off as though it's a normal season. And there will be a few fans allowed in the ballpark. No ballpark will be at capacity, but there will be a number of fans that will be allowed in, relatives of the players and maybe team officials and stuff like that. But it begins on April 1st, April Fool's Day. And we'll see how far we go. Hopefully baseball is going to learn some lessons from last year and maybe some from this year. Minor league baseball has been reorganized. It's going to be smaller than it was and fewer teams. And there'll be some changes made. But the fact that baseball is coming back is a sure sign that one of the winters of our discontent has come to an end, and now we're going to roll on into a nice new spring. And in Washington, of course, there's in Congress, people can't seem to get together. Get things, come together, put the good of the country ahead of party loyalty. And unfortunately, some people, including Crazy Cruz from Texas and a few other nitwits, are still loyal to that idiot that the public booted out of the White House back in January. There's still questions on the attempted insurrection that took place on January 6th. And I think everybody knows it, but none of his supporters want to admit it, that it was instigated by Donald Trump. And the man should be arrested and should be tried for treason, because he attempted to overthrow the constitutional government of the United States. And he got a number of his stooges to do it. He invited them to come to Washington on January 6th. He encouraged them in a speech outside the White House to go up there on Capitol Hill, tear the place apart. If you have to, hang the vice president. And he says, I will be marching right with you. Well, of course, that was a big lie. As soon as his goons headed for the White House, old Trumpy hit, or for Congress, the Capitol. Did Trump go with him? Of course not. Might get hurt. He turned around and hightailed it back into the White House where he'd be safe and sound. As I said before many times, the man runs his mouth, but he's as yellow as his hair. No question about that. Well, right now the Biden administration is making strides toward getting this thing under control. You seem to get under control in one area, pops back up in another. And now Michigan is being hit very, very hard with this coronavirus. So we'll see where it goes from there. Also, something that is very, very concerning, the number of Republican-controlled states that are starting to attempt to deny people the right to vote. Georgia just passed a law restricting the number of people that can vote. It's aimed at minorities, because it was minorities that turned Trump out of the White House and returned it to normal in the election of Biden-Harris. But Georgia is a very, very foolish law that restricts the number of people that can vote. It even prohibits people from being given water as they wait in line to vote. And I think this will go before the Supreme Court. And the court, even though it's 6-3 on the conservative level, I think they're going to look at this law and they're going to throw it out. It's totally unconstitutional. Totally unconstitutional. It reverts back to the 30s, the 40s, maybe the early 50s when Jim Crow was very, very strong. And Georgia, which went for Joe Biden because of the minority vote, which ousted 2 Republican incumbents and elected 2 Democrats to the U.S. Senate. Now the Republican governor and Republican-controlled legislature are trying to make sure that that doesn't happen again. And so they passed this law already, and it will be challenged, and it will go all the way to the Supreme Court. Well, on another topic, this week is, in the Christian world, is what is known as Holy Week. It's the most solemn week out of the year. And it's a week in which Christians celebrate the crucifixion of Jesus and his resurrection on Easter Sunday. The early prophets, all through the Old Testament, the early prophets talked about a promise that God had made to Abraham. And Abraham, of course, is regarded as the common father of 3 major religions in the world. The Jewish religion, Christianity, and the Muslim religion. He is regarded as the great father of all 3. And so, the Holy Week, Christians commemorate the high, the low, the high again of Christianity. First high would be what we celebrate on Palm Sunday, when Jesus arrives in Jerusalem, and he comes in Jerusalem riding on a donkey, and he is hailed as a Savior. It's Hosanna in the highest, and welcomed. And many of that same crowd that was welcoming him on Palm Sunday would be calling for his execution on Good Friday. And as Christians, we go from Palm Sunday, we go to Thursday of this week, which is Holy Thursday. And what we commemorate on Holy Thursday is what has become known as the Last Supper. Jesus and his disciples were practicing Jews, and they adhered to the Torah, the rules and regulations of the Jewish faith, which are spelled out in the book of Deuteronomy, which is one of the first 5 books of the Old Testament. The first 5 books of the Old Testament are what comprise what is known as the Torah, or Jewish law, that regulates the regulations and the requirements of the Hebrew faith. And of course, the Passover, I believe, is being celebrated, I believe it was this weekend. So being practicing Jews, the Last Supper was more or less the meal, the ceremonial meal that they have before the Sabbath sets in. And what it commemorates is the liberation of the Hebrew people from captivity in Egypt, when under the leadership of Moses, his brother Aaron, and the result of the 10 plagues that God inflicted upon the Egyptians, Pharaoh released the Hebrews, and they were allowed to cross what is now the Red Sea and settle in land that God would provide for them, which is now Israel, Palestine. And so the Last Supper, or this meal, is to commemorate the Exodus. And Jesus and his followers, being good practicing Jews, had that, what we now call the Last Supper. It was after that that Jesus knew that for him, his mortal life was drawing to a close. And of course, there's the trip to the garden, and Jesus, of course, would be betrayed by a person who at one time must have been his friend, and that was Judas Iscariot. Judas was chosen as one of the original 12 apostles. And he was also given charge of the money bag, being the guy that took care of the finances. And you don't give that to somebody that you don't know very well. So somewhere along the line, Jesus and Judas must have been fairly good friends. And Judas got to keep the money bag, and of course, unfortunately, he became a little bit greedy. And he saw a chance to pick up a little more money. He knew that the leaders of the Jewish nation at that time were looking to get rid of Jesus, because Jesus was a problem for them. Well, the question comes up, who is Jesus? Well, there's no question he was probably the most influential individual in Western civilization, at least the history of Western civilization. His ministry only lasted 3 years. He was born in Bethlehem, as we know, as we celebrate at Christmas. He pops up again when he's 12 years old, when he gets lost in the temple of Jerusalem. And then we don't hear anything of him for another 18 years. We know that as a profession, his foster father Joseph was a carpenter. And no doubt Jesus was brought up also being a carpenter. There's a rumor that when Herod built a large, I don't know, maybe you'd call it a palace or whatever, near the Sea of Galilee, that two of the carpenters that worked on that building were Joseph and Jesus. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know. That's hearsay. But Joseph was a carpenter. He earned his living by contracting out, doing carpentry jobs, and no doubt training Jesus as a young man to take over the business eventually when Joseph would pass away, which he did sometime in that 30 years that Jesus was leading a private life. Excuse me. But at the age of 30, Jesus went public. And he organized his disciples, his followers. He proclaimed himself to be the Messiah, the Son of God, God-man. For 42 centuries, from the time of Abraham the prophets of the Old Testament had foretold of a coming of a Messiah. Remember the Jewish people, after their liberation from Egypt, and they settled in what is now Palestine, Israel, we call Israel now. But they were not always a free nation. They were also occupied by a foreign power. At one time, when they were overrun by Babylon, they were all taken into captivity and hauled off to Babylon to be servants. It was when the Persians conquered Babylon and King Cyrus II of Persia returned the Jewish people to their homeland. And then, of course, there came the Greeks with Alexander. And finally, in the time of Jesus, the Romans. And Palestine was not a prize assignment, sort of a backwater. So people that Roman leadership felt probably weren't going to go anywhere, that's where they were assigned into Palestine. Palestine divided into Judea, Galilee, Samaria, had a puppet king that the Romans had propped up. Herod, who went down in some histories as Herod the Great, was not Jewish, even though he was on the throne of David. He himself was not Jewish. He may have been a Syrian. He may have been an Egyptian. I don't know. Nobody really knows. But he was a puppet king put there by the Romans. But one thing the Jewish people did not want to do, they did not want to upset the Roman conquerors, because Rome was vicious. When Rome retaliated, they were vicious. And one of their most vicious procurators was Pontius Pilate. And he was the procurator in Palestine at that time. He despised Herod. The two of them did not get along, because he knew that Herod was a puppet, and he didn't think much of him as a person either. But Pilate himself, the man was even regarded as too vicious for the Roman government. So in time, Pilate himself was removed and called back to Rome and given some other minor assignment. But the Jewish people, the Jewish leadership, did not want to upset the Roman conqueror. They didn't want them coming down hard on them with their vicious type of punishment. So as Jesus is going about preaching and picking up followers and performing miracles and laying the groundwork for Christianity, picking his apostles, who would be the founding stones of Christianity, this was of grave concern to the Jewish leadership. And Jesus was a problem. They had to have that fine balance. You know, is he the Messiah or is he not? That was their question. Well, the leadership determined that he was not. We know now, at least in the Christian scepter, that he was the Messiah. He was the one who was promised. But many of our Jewish brethren today, of course, say no, he was a great prophet, a great preacher, but he was not the Messiah. In the Mohammed religion, they say the same thing. He was a great prophet, but they deny that Jesus was the Messiah. In Christianity, we say he was the Messiah. He was the one that the prophets spoke of, told of, who was going to come and was going to liberate the Jewish people from captivity. They were looking for someone to come as a great conqueror. As you know, he came as a helpless infant. And how he would fulfill his ministry, the 3 years when he laid the foundations for Christianity, picked his followers, and had many, and this was very, very disturbing to Jewish leadership, that when they saw their opportunity, they decided, let's turn them over to the Romans, have them put to death. And Pontius Pilate was their foil. And of course, we all know the story, how Judas Iscariot, for 30 pieces of silver, betrayed Jesus over to the Jewish leadership. He went first before the high priest, then he went before Herod, and finally they took him to Pilate. And after various conversations with Pilate, Pilate said, well, all right, I have him scourged. Took him down the whipping post, and some of his muscle men from the Roman army laid a few whips across his back and everything, crowned him with thorns. Then he brought him back before the Jewish people, and he said, hey, look, here's your king. I punished him enough. Well, the Jewish people said, no. They talked about the old custom where Pilate would pardon someone before the Passover. And so he offered them a choice, a hardened criminal like Barabbas or Jesus. Said, which one do you want? And they said, well, we will take Barabbas and you can execute Jesus. And of course, that's what happened. Jesus went through the Roman form of crucifixion on a hill called Golgotha outside Jerusalem. So many of the Jewish people could see these people being executed, hanging on a cross. Many of them were hanging there for long periods of time. You can imagine the agony it must have been, with nails driven through your wrists and your feet. And really stripped down to the point where your body was open foil for any insect or any bug or whatever that wanted to come and bite you or chew on you or whatever. A horrible way to die. But that was Rome's version of capital punishment. And we know the Gospel of St. John tells us, and St. John the Evangelist, who was present at that crucifixion, along with Mary, the mother of Jesus, that Jesus lasted about 3 hours before he died. And many who have experimented in the medical profession say Jesus did not die from the pain of the cross, but he died from asphyxiation as his body slumped. His head went down, his ability to breathe was cut off, and that was the cause of his death. And Jesus was taken down from the cross, not by any of his close disciples, but by a couple of men who were actually part of the Jewish leadership, but weren't quite sure whether Jesus was the Messiah or whether he wasn't. But they did take him down from the cross, and they laid him in a tomb nearby. And of course, 3 days later, when some of Jesus' female followers, Mary Magdalene and a couple of other women, went to the tomb, they found the rock which sealed the entrance to the tomb and rolled back. And they found that the tomb was empty. And of course, we know from reading the New Testament that Jesus appeared several times to his followers in the next 40 days after Easter. So this week is what Christians celebrate. And it's going to be a lot different this year. Many of these churches that are usually full on Good Friday and Easter won't be that way this year. For many of us who are practicing, we'll be watching it on TV. So with that, I want to wish everyone a very, very happy and safe Easter. May Almighty God continue to bless these United States of America. With all our faults, we're still the greatest nation on God's earth. Have a great week, and we'll see you all next week.